Hello friends, it's Dan. Welcome back. Welcome to another plastic miniature review, this time for the Oathmark Human Infantry produced by Northstar. And my normal disclaimer here is that this is sponsored content because Northstar sent this sprue to me to look at with you guys. So yet again, thank you Northstar for your continued support here. And I suppose while I'm getting disclaimers out of the way, let me state too that this is a sprue review, which are for sets I've identified that are really just one sprue repeated multiple times, so we can look at just this one sprue together and I can give you a rough idea of what's going to come inside of the set if you were to pick it up for yourself. And if you're new here, what that means, a particular welcome to you. I guess my veteran subscribers know the drill at this point, but what we're going to do is go through the sprue in detail, give you a breakdown on all the bits, give you some close-up shots of the details. I'm going to assemble these figures, do a little bit of kit bashing. We'll do some scale comparisons with a few manufacturers I've got in my collection, and then I'll give you my final thoughts. So that's where we're headed. I did want to state here too that my channel members have had a rough idea of kind of the pacing and timing of these Northstar reviews that I've been doing. They actually selected the order and decided they wanted to do like a mix-up of Frostgrave, Stargrave, and Oathmark, kind of alternating. And so I'd originally planned to do the Dwarf range next for Oathmark. I thought it would be cool to do the light infantry, regular infantry, and the heavy infantry like back to back. However, I heard from my Northstar rep that the human heavy infantry set, I think the highly anticipated human heavy infantry set, is due for release imminently. It sounds like within the next couple of weeks here. So I thought this is a great time instead to look at the rest of the human range, because we've looked at their human light infantry, which I thought was very successful, but we haven't yet looked at the base infantry, which was an earlier box, or their human light cavalry. I also heard there's eventually going to be a human heavy cavalry set. In fact, I think that's the next Oathmark set that's in development at the moment. Of course, after the heavy infantry are released. But in the meantime, what we've got are the human infantry here. I'm excited for these because, as I mentioned, I thought that the light infantry was very successful, but also because this is an earlier Oathmark set, one of the earliest ones, in fact. And this is maybe the only Oathmark set that I've heard from some subscribers that they did not like, which surprised me because I haven't found one yet that I don't like. So I'm eager to kind of look at this, see how they all go together, see how some of the bits look, to make an assessment for myself. Let me say here too, if you get this box for yourself, what you're going to end up getting are 6 copies of this sprue, because there are 30 miniatures inside of the box. So again, you're going to get 6 copies of this sprue, and then you're also going to get 3 copies of, they come in sets of 10. It kind of mirrors this. This is the same thing, but it's their 25 by 50 millimeter bases. So you can imagine just 10 of these instead. So 30 of these square Renadra flat bases. So enough to put everybody on a 25 by 25 millimeter flat base. They're produced, I don't think I mentioned, for the Oathmark range, which again is made by Northstar, but the rule set is a Mass Battles fantasy game that's produced by Osprey. So they're kind of done in partnership with one another. So let's dive in here. Enough chit chat. Let me look at the front and the back of the sprue here, and then I want to start going through some of these bits in detail together. My normal production notes apply here, even though this is an older Oathmark set, that I think there's really like no flash or mold lines. I know that I'm becoming kind of like a broken record with that, but it's the truth that I think production standards have gotten so high at this point that it's almost not worth mentioning, but I do, just for the veterans out there that are used to being concerned with that kind of thing with plastic sets, that there's really nothing to worry about here. Even flash, I've mentioned before too, that I really only ever see it these days on bits like this, like on these arrows. You can see that just need to be snipped off. But otherwise, they're very clean sculpts, despite, again, their age. So let's start here with the bodies. And if you saw my light infantry review, the human light infantry that is, you'll see some similarities here. And the design aesthetic for Oathmark is so cool that it really looks Tolkien to me. Like, it looks like it could have existed at some point in human history. It's a little bit like early medieval, late dark age in terms of the design, but generally, again, the feeling I get is that it's more grounded fantasy, to borrow a term again from a subscriber on that one. But the design is very similar to the light infantry. More armor, of course, kind of this neat studded armor design. Some more of the cloaks still. The tunics that they're wearing are longer too than the light infantry variant. I'll flip it over here for you. But again, despite the age, I think these look really, really good. Again, kind of simple folds on the tunics there, which will make them easy for painting. But I actually don't even see any of the comparative shallowness in detail, I'll say carefully, like that we saw with their Cultist 1 versus the Cultist 3 or the Frostgrave crew. And here, I think these look really good. Like, these are nice, crisp sculpts. Again, any shallowness that exists seems to be a design choice. So you still have nice, crisp edges here where the armor meets up with the like robes of the tunic there. Again, I don't see any like folds or anything that look weird. There's no proportion problems with it. So that's a good start. Let's look at heads down here. So there are actually 10 heads across the sprue, but you can see 9 of them are down here. And then one of them is up here, more like armored looking design, which I think will give us some insight into the human heavy infantry in terms of like the armor and helmets that are going to come in that set. But what's here is also great. Again, very expressive detail on the faces. I like that a lot of the helmets are kind of like cattywampus, as they would say down south here in the States. Just kind of off kilter. It gives them a real, like, I don't know, ragtag look. Like, I go back to like Bretonnian peasants if you're a Warhammer player. Is the feeling that I get looking at these guys. And all the faces are different. There's no copy and pasting here. So yeah, I think, so 10 heads to 5 bodies is like the bare minimum ratio that I would expect in a plastic miniature set. So that's the only drawback to some of these earlier North Star sets, is that they're more limited from a head variety standpoint. I can't even say from a bits variety standpoint, because you can say there's plenty of weapon options here. But we saw that on the Frostgrave sets that we reviewed, the early Frostgrave sets, that is. And in this case, with the early Oathmark sets, the main limitation I've found is head options, because the newer Oathmark sets have a stronger ratio of heads to bodies, I have found. But again, what is here is very nice. But again, if you wanted to have all of them with armored heads, for example, you'd have to, on 6 of the miniatures within the box, have this faceplate fully armored helmet, which I think looks cool. It's not going to be for everybody though, because again, that's more like a unit champion kind of guy there. So otherwise, you're going to have to mix in some of these unarmored heads, which is not a huge deal. Even this like hat looks quite like thick and padded, so I think it would work just fine. So let's talk then about weapons. So Oathmark, the design philosophy, I really appreciate, because I've criticized other sets for not doing this, which is when we're designing something for a mass battles game, I want to have an equipment option such that I can equip everybody in the unit the same way. So we see an example of that here, where you can equip them with spears, hand weapons down here, or bows, and you can see just from a glance that there are enough of each of those options to equip everybody in the unit the same way. So they could all have spears if you wanted, they could all have bows if you wanted, or they could all have hand weapons if you wanted. And I really, again, I appreciate that for a set that's designed for a mass battle system like this. So let's start up here with the spears, because for me anyway, from a design standpoint, this might be the only place that I have a criticism. The only thing I see that I might agree with is I don't particularly like the design of the spear tips, but that's it. That's such a quibble of a complaint, that it's more of this like broadhead design that looks just a little bit wide to me. I think that's all it is, that I like, unless you were thrusting that into like unarmored flesh, like I don't think that's doing anything to like chainmail, because it's just too stubby. So other than that though, I think that they look fine. I actually like that their weapons are heroically proportioned too. Speaking of which, let's jump down here to the hand weapons. Good mix. You've got these like generic looking arming swords. Again, maybe some things are a little bit too thick, like the hilt of the sword there, or is that the pommel at the very bottom of it, is maybe just a little bit too thick. But I think that's more a design choice, that they want these to be like thick, heroically scaled weapons, which, as I said, I appreciate on the tabletop level in this scale, because the alternative is worse, that if it's too thin, like if it's too true scale, they just don't look that imposing to me at the tabletop level. But I like a nice mix of swords here, a mace, an axe. And they've all got these bracers on, which actually match the design that come in the Wizards set that we've looked at, maybe a couple of other Frostgrave sets too, where they have this kind of generic bracer design, which also suggests that there's some kitbash ability, if you'll allow the term, with some of those other sets. Let's move up here to the bows too, so you can see it's a simple short bow design, which works just fine for this unit. Again, it seems that we're trying to represent some kind of like standard infantry, city watch, like militia, something like that. I think I like the bows in this better than the light infantry. The light infantry, to my eye anyway, the bows almost seem slightly shorter than this, which is fine, like it technically works, but these I think also work very, very well. And because they all have the bracers on, it looks like they've already got the armor on the forearm there for shooting bows. And you can see a mix then of some shooting poses, like these two here, and then some holding arrows. And there should be one hand somewhere that looks like it just loosed an arrow, or I guess they actually have three. So there's three here that are ready to loose an arrow, shooting arrows, and then two with arrows in hand. So, yeah, I mean, I think that it's very effective for what it's trying to convey. Oh, rounding out the sprue, of course, we've got 5 left arms here. We've got these 5 shield designs, which are actually the same design as what we saw with the light infantry. However, these are both banded, so you can see there's like a bit of metal going around the outside of it, and they're not battle damaged. The ones on the light infantry set don't have that metal banding around the outside and are like damaged, which is cool. So even being able to mix those in between your units is a nice touch, and mirrors actually what we saw with the orc infantry and the orc heavy infantry, that the shields were slightly different between those two sets. Again, I think just to mix things up. So I would expect that the human heavy infantry is also going to have a slightly different variant of this shield, maybe with some like banding going across the middle of it as well, but we'll see when that set's released. I should mention too, these command bits up here, I talked about the head but not the swords. So there are 5 regular hand weapon options down here. There's a 6th right arm up here, which is clearly some kind of champion sword, which looks like a condensed version of a great sword of some kind, just kind of scaled down. So it works fine. And then you've got a left-handed sword here. So again, if you wanted a unit champion with a sword in each hand, you have the option to do that. And then one banner option here with a little like almost, I don't know, it looks Saxon to me maybe, design there. But my general criticism of Oathmark standard sets, or standards really across all of the sets, is that I find them to be too short. Like I have to modify mine when I'm building up my units. But this works just fine. Again, if you just threw that on top, you got yourself a standard bearer if you want. So as they said on the sprue, I really like this set, so I'm going to put it to the test here. I want to put some of these miniatures together. I want to kit bash with some of my other miniatures in my collection and see how they look. Alright, so I've built a bunch of these models for you, and I have to concede that I do have a concern having put everything together now. And the concern is that I must be missing something, because I really love these figures. I think they're fantastic. I don't see any proportion issues. I had no issues with assembly. Actually, it was really kind of a refreshing experience, because I've found like all the miniatures I've been putting together for the past, feels like a couple of weeks now, have been really like intricately detailed with lots of pieces to go together, whereas these were 5 parts: body, head, 2 arms, and a shield. And that was really enjoyable thing to do. They really remind me, I think, of like early Games Workshop Warhammer plastic sets, going back to maybe like 6th edition, which is my favorite era for Warhammer plastics, I think. But yeah, they were a breeze to put together. I think the finished products all look great. Okay, these first 3 miniatures I've shown you are just straight off of the sprue. And yeah, is there like an argument that they're not like that exciting? Sure, but that's a design feature. That's not a bug. They're meant to be like generic human infantry in a fantasy setting. What I've done here, this is body from this set. The arms are from the light infantry, and the head is from the light infantry. The human, like the Oathmark human light infantry. I should be clear. And then that's just like a random Dark Age round shield that I found. So I think that looks cool enough. Here's the opposite conversion. So this body is from the human light infantry. The arms and the head are from this set. So the human infantry is a little bit like bulkier. That's mostly because the sleeves are larger. But I think that from a scale standpoint, they work together just fine. And since all roads kind of lead back to Necromunda, it seems, here's a Stargrave conversion for you. So this is a body from the infantry set. The head is from, I think, the troopers set. The right arm from the mercenaries. The backpack from the scavengers. And the left arm, I actually think, is from the Wizards 2 set. Just to show you how compatible these North Star boxes are. I made some kind of, I don't know, desert marauder guy there. So here we're going back to the Frostgrave Ghost Archipelago crew. That's the body there. And then the head and the arms are from this set. Once again, just to show you how cross-compatible the entirety of the North Star range is. And this, if you can't wait for the heavy infantry to come out, probably next month, realistically. Here I did, this is a elf heavy infantry body, which looks maybe a little bit slim compared to the bits from this set, but I think it works just fine. And then here's a cross-manufacturer comparison. So this is a Wargames Atlantic Guard body with arms and a head from this set. And once again, I think the scale works just fine, which is always unusual to me because Wargames Atlantic is a little bit more true scale with their bits, I think, compared to some other manufacturers. But I think it works great. So if you got some of those in your collection, you're trying to mix some in, that's an option for you as well. Let's throw them on the Lazy Susan and see how they all scale up. Alright, here we go. Sorry for the background noise, my furnace just kicked on, but this will be a short clip anyway. So what we've got here spinning around are the bare plastic miniatures are from this human infantry set. Everything primed in white has the name of a manufacturer or range listed in red on the base. And as usual, pay attention to the fact that some of them have splash or puddle bases, and some don't. So that adds a couple millimeters of height. This is generally true of the North Star Oathmark range. Really, I guess North Star generally, because they're all scaled the same way. But that I think they scale up pretty decently with everybody. Again, they're heroically proportioned in terms of the heads and the weapons. But the height works great, I think you can see there with some Victrix models, even with some of the fantasy models on the far side. Like the Warhammer 7th or the Reaper figure there, Forgotten Realms is another, it's Fireforge's fantasy line. So I think you could really blend these in kind of wherever you want. So what's the final verdict? I really like these guys. I guess I just have to say I respectfully disagree with any of those who said that they've had this kit and didn't like it, because I don't see any issues with it. Again, I think the sculpting is all there, the detail's all there, it's got all the options that I would want. Would I want maybe like more heads? Yeah, but again, this still meets my criteria. That 2-to-1 ratio is my minimum that I'm looking for, and it meets that, so I can't even really criticize that. So the ease of assembly, I didn't find any issue with like the pose or the scale, again, or the variety that is here. I think all looks really nice, and it's a lovely like foundational set, not only for the human range within Oathmark, but the generic take that they've gone with as a kind of like grounded fantasy aesthetic, which is true of Oathmark generally, but the kind of generic approach in terms of design means that these are really useful well beyond Oathmark. I mean, for any fantasy skirmish game, right, from things like Mordheim to Middle-earth strategy battle games, I think would work really well there. Sci-fi games, not only Stargrave, but we looked at Necromunda, there's plenty of other sci-fi applications here as well. But beyond that, like as a mass battles game player predominantly, I see uses here. If you're like a Warhammer Bretonnian or an Empire player, these are really great generic infantry that you can either kitbash or just paint up as is, and I think they would work really well. Or in historical contexts, these would work great from really like mid-Dark Ages to like late medieval, I think, as just like peasant infantry. So check them out. Again, I got a link down in the description to the North Star site as usual. it makes me really excited to see what they're going to do with their heavy infantry and how these miniatures will be able to kit bash with those, as we've seen with everything from the North Star range. It's really a staple of their catalog that you can mix and match these kits freely. So another great entry. I really am, as I said, looking forward to the heavy infantry. We'll be doing the human light cavalry next, so stay tuned for that. Thank you once again to North Star for sending this our way, giving us a chance to check these out in detail. Really appreciate it. Appreciate all of you for dropping by for this one in the meantime. And until next time, happy gaming.